are live. Peter, welcome to the show. How are you?
Good afternoon. I'm very well, Simon. And yourself?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm always good. Funny old times we're in, isn't it? Funny old times. It must be a funny time for comedy.
It's been very unusual, yeah, comedy-wise and everything going on, and critiquing the establishment, the government. but comedy-wise is actually my it's 5-year anniversary today. I know we were scheduled to do this a little bit earlier, but today, 30th of September, is the anniversary of me getting back into comedy. I did my first comeback gig at a place in Stockwell, southwest London, 5-minute set. And, people always say to me, "Oh, how long have you been in comedy?" And all that. And the last few weeks I've been saying, "Oh, the anniversary's coming up at the end of the month, the end of September." So
this is the anniversary of you being back in comedy for 5 years.
Yes, basically. Wow. I did a comedy course many years ago. Didn't keep it up. Done a showcase. You do like a 6-week course on a Sunday, couple of hours on a Sunday. Do all the structure, the training, the learning, practicing material. Go home, write material, come back the following week, try it, and they give you sort of like confidence lessons and all that, and fall over that people catch you in the group. It's all interesting stuff, like a comedy course. And then at the end of the 8-week course, it was actually you do a showcase, you invite all your friends. The promoter makes a lot of money off your friends. The room's busy, like there's about 10 comedians. They're all invited their friends. Busy room, 200 people, Saturday night. The trainer is the MC, and you do your first gig. And then the idea after that is you go out and do the circuit, and I just didn't do that at the time. I had an evening job. It was kind of cutting into my like doing the comedy. Nowadays, it's very easy to go out and do the admin of being a comedian, because everything's online. Facebook is you book a lot of your stuff. There's a booking website called Open Comedy. Go back like 20 years when that was. It was all like, there wasn't internet as such in them days. There was internet, but there wasn't like an easy booking system for going out and getting gigs. So I carried on writing. I stayed like behind the scenes. I worked the door of my friends' gigs. I was networking, meeting people. Became like a sort of a local journalist, interviewing comedians if they did gigs in my area. So and then in the end, I got married. I lived abroad, like in a place where comedy wasn't really, wasn't the first language, wasn't English. So in the end, like when I came back, it's like I'm submitting stuff to the BBC. I'm not getting anywhere as such. I've been broadcasting the BBC, but like tiny stuff. In the end, I've just got to get back on stage. And that's what I went and did. Eventually, I worked my way up towards it. Booked a date on the calendar, took some friends, and went up on stage and done 5 minutes. And 5 years on, and here I am. Wow. A lot more confident now. 5 years on.
Yeah,
the first few gigs are very like nervy, and you've written stuff on your hand, or you've got like a little notebook, and you because you're not like used to it, you just stumble here and there, and because it's like everybody takes a friend to this particular gig. It's called Comedy Virgins in Stockwell, and the Cavendish Arms, lovely little pub. They've struggled obviously during lockdown, but they're still there, still going. Everyone takes a friend, so it's a very supportive audience, because most of the comedians are new at that stage, and then you'll have one or two that are coming in, have been doing it for a year or two, or even 4 or 5, and they're just doing like trying out some new material, like a pro comedian, might be a pro comedian emceeing it, so but it's a great experience. I love being on stage now. At the time, it was more like, I like the writing. I'm good at the writing. I just keep submitting stuff, keep sending stuff, emailing stuff. But if you don't get anywhere, it's like and I work in the door of my friend's gig, and I'm meeting all these people. And in the end, it's like I just got to do it. Just got to get up. It's not a theory thing. You can't sort of talk about it. You've got to get up and you talk about it, but you get up on stage and do it really. So.
There'd be a lot of people listening, and they'll be wanting to hear about your wisdom, really, of what was that like, those first few gigs, and how do you build your confidence in your set? Because being public speaking already is scary, right, for a lot
Absolutely.
of people, but yet then your job is to then be funny. Now, of course, you must have a desired passion behind that already. Like, I can definitely see why you have that passion, because it's great to make people laugh and everything else, but you're one man on one stage, one microphone, and you've got to make lots of people laugh. What when you're preparing for that, when you were going on stage for the very first times, what was that like, and how did you prepare for it?
Yeah, well, say like the first time I did it 20 years ago, I didn't carry on, but we had the course, the comedy course, the 8 weeks, and we had the camaraderie. We were all in it together. We were all starting at the same time, so that was really good. I know a few people now that come into the open mic circuit without doing a course. And some of them are good and develop themselves. Some of them are actors. They've got a little bit of stage experience. It's not the same as doing comedy, but it's kind of a debate that goes on. But it's I think having the course, having the structure and the camaraderie and the advice from the experienced MC or trainer, tutor, it really helps. And then when you're doing that first gig, you're either backstage or you're waiting to come on and the MC's talking and that, and I think at the moment, because we've had a long break with lockdown, obviously we're not being on stage. We were doing Zoom gigs, which is not the same, but it did keep like a little bit of grey matter going in the brain, like how to structure stuff and all that. But I think at the moment, because I've done 2 gigs last week, which I was quite happy with, and I got like a lot of compliments from. But because like at peak about 2 to 3 years ago, 2 to 3 years ago, I was doing like 5-6 gigs a week. I was emceeing small Saturday night venues. So I was like the main man, as it were. And it can fall or the evening can fall or break on the MC and that. So I was always like trying to be warm and bring them in and then bring an act on. But I've gone off track there.
No, that's good. It's really interesting. It's really interesting.
Yeah. The first thing I'm thinking at the moment is, because I've not done a lot of gigs recently, I've done 2 gigs last week, is just remember that first line, and then the rest of it hopefully will fall into place, because I've got that experience now. I've done like 750 now gigs. So just remember the first line and the rest of it will come.
It's funny actually, because when I was working on stage years ago, the singers which would go out, sometimes they could just go out and say, "What's my first word?" Because if they know the first word, they'll be okay. But sometimes they go like, "I've forgotten the first word. What's the first word?" They're like, "It's the." And they're like, "Oh yeah, I remember now." And the singers would go out and be fantastic. But
it's like you're turning a switch, really. It's like, oh, there we go. I've done this before.
They're in, because once you're in, it's automatically, if you know this routine or
it comes back. Yeah, it comes back.
Well, it's really interesting. You're talking about the course, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah.
And then you're talking about the structure. So of course, it's a performance. So how you're talking about the structure of how you put your jokes together and how you structure the show. Like, go into a bit more detail there, because I think that's really interesting.
Okay, so there's a couple of structures that work. Similes is like, say, you might compare yourself to a lot of things. A lot of people do is compare that. They talk about their town where they live and how rubbish it is. That's a little bit hack, but a lot of people do it. And it's like the tutors, they teach you, like they say to you, talk about what you know. So you're going to talk about where you were born, your family, your relationships, your dating, whatever. Things that you like, things that whether it's sport or whether it's climbing mountains, things that and then it's like you say, public speaking. If you're going to go on stage and talk about climbing mountains, it probably helps that you've climbed a mountain. So I go on and talk about, I'm from Bethnal Green, blah blah blah. It's known for the craze, blah 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 blah. Pie and mash, blah blah blah. Compare it to something, and then that sort of thing. So the similes is comparing yourself. I talk about who I look like. Again, that's another thing that a lot of comedians do. I look like a version gone wrong of such and such. I'd compare myself to Moby. people knocking on the door, like salespeople trying to sell me gas and electric. Oh, it's Moby. It's like it's like in the end, you can not write a joke about me and Moby. It's like sort of thing. So,
is it kind of good and almost humbling to be a bit self-deprecating? Because is that a good thing for the British audience? I know we're a funny old bunch, aren't we? But if you're a little bit self-deprecating at the beginning, where you're prepared to take the mick out of yourself, do the crowd tend to like you more because of that? So if you came on stage and said, I'm the whatever version of Moby, I'd find that immediately funny.
Yeah, totally, absolutely. Like you say, it's a British thing. You come on, you talk about, I'm from this town and it's rubbish, and I'm like a worse version of this, or a fat version of this and that. And yeah, it's the British self-deprecation thing. It does work. It totally works. It absolutely works. That if you come on and, like, for an example, like, I am from Bethnal Green. That's a genuine thing. Mickey Flanagan, hugely successful comedian, much more successful than me, slightly older than me. Also from Bethnal Green, you know. And I went to the tour, the warm up, like a work in progress show of his last DVD, which I think is his third in total. Obviously, but at this stage, he's made lots of money. So he references it, you know, and he says, like, I've got this this thing to blow the leaves with now, you know, like 50, yeah, I'll blow £50 notes out of the way, you know, and it's, you know, he came from a working class background. I know exactly where he was, his street where he lives and all that. I know people that know him. I've met him in a restaurant, had a chat with him. But when he was still not famous, but like he was established, I knew who he was, like in the Comedy Geek, you know. But yeah, so yeah, reference it. You know, once you've made it, you reference it. You know, make a funny remark about it. But like people, like, with Mickey Flanagan, he's like just a total one-off. You know, so people love him, and you know, he references when he was poor, he references when he was mega rich. You know, it works for him. You know, it works for people.
I suppose it's about sharing your perspective on a situation, and then, you know, if you can then make it humorous in some respects, because the one thing that you've got unique and I've got unique is always our own perspective, and if that's what you're sharing.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's again, you know, like, and I used to do stuff about being married and living in a Muslim country, Turkey it was actually, and you know, when I went and done that first comeback gig at the Cavendish, at the Cav as we call it. My friend who was with me says, you know, that's unique to you. You know, no one else can do that sort of stuff, really. You know, so talk about what you know. You know, people come on and start talking about the Brexit bill or the coronavirus when they don't actually read a newspaper. You know, they might have got it from the bloke in the pub or someone uninformed off of Twitter. Then it's not going to be as attention to detail is I think is very important as well in comedy. You know your stuff a little bit. You know.
Well, I think you need to know it. I mean, I know some people I was working with before, and they were saying, although on stage comedians can have a certain character, right, and that character might be playing dumb or playing a bit stupid or whatever, and he said, but don't doubt for a second, most of the comedians are incredibly intelligent to understand a topic that well to then make it funny. And I think that's so true, isn't it? I mean, God, you look at some of the top comedians, they take really complicated, sometimes, I mean, God, I follow Ricky Gervais, so he talks about, you know, some really points that are really close to the bone.
Totally.
And it's because they're that, and I think most comedians tend to be pretty intelligent behind it, but then they put on a show, put on a theme, whoever is the character that they want to be. So normally a lot of great comedians certainly know their topic incredibly well, in my experience, what I think.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. There was an article in the paper, it was during lockdown, so it was maybe 4 or 5 months ago. It was Gary Lineker. I can't remember the subject he was specifically talking about, but he did say, like, all comedians are intelligent because they have to think more or less what you were just saying. And I thought, oh yeah, Gary Lineker's saying that, you know. And
he stole that quite off me. That's why.
There you go. Yeah. I mean, I remember he did kind of work with a few comedians on the sports panel show, didn't he? But that was like 15, 20 years ago. But so it made an impression on him, you know.
Yeah, sure.
But yeah, there you go.
So talk me through that journey, right? So and also, and then maybe let's go before that. What was your initial motivation? Why did you want to become a comedian? What is it inside you that says, I want to make people laugh?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up like watching the sitcoms, BBC One, and you know, and then gradually Channel 4, a bit more edgy, a bit more youthy. And I was doing like a sales job where I'm talking to people every day and I'm being a rep. And then something like I got a bit of confidence, you know, to do sales. And then I didn't really know. And I've done a radio course, actually, a radio broadcasting course, just a chance thing. I saw an advert in a local paper, you know, which I bought to read about the sport, the football. And I applied for the course, got on the course, done the course, the radio course. From the radio course, I started, let's go and watch this radio comedy being broadcast, you know, being filmed in North London, you know. Went to that and then started getting into live comedy. You know, these people, some of the people that was on the radio show being recorded, like you see them on Des O'Connor doing a little sort of interview, you know, back in the days, and it's thinking like, you know, like this. Then I went and saw like Dave Allen was the first comedy show I ever went to live, and obviously Dave Allen, people would know Dave Allen from the television. Then I went and saw like Punt and Dennis again from the television. They were the Merre Whitehouse Experience in the 90s. They were very sort of like well known, and then gradually started going to like, there's a comedy night around the corner from where I live. You know, it's not big names, but it's on the doorstep. You know, let's go and have a look at that. You know, pop in there with a friend on a Sunday night, have a drink and that show, and then just becoming really interested in comedy. And it's like, how can I do this? You know, because people say to me, "Oh, you're funny." They do tell you that. And then, so I was like, again, this is pre-internet almost, really. The internet was about, but it wasn't used to the way it is now, like where we live and breathe it. So there was a magazine in London called Time Out London, which and I just like, again, flicking through it. The comedy section in Time Out was amazing. It was like a Bible, you know, and all the comics would be looking through it. And as a punter, as an audience member, I'd be looking through it, and I would go to that one Tuesday. Oh, he's good. He's been on the telly. That's, you know, £10 to see that, and sport acts and that. And then and at the back of Time Out, there was an advert for a comedy course, which is inside that comedy school. Applied, got in touch with it, paid the fee, went and done that for the 8 weeks, done the showcase. But then I just didn't go out and do the course, didn't go out and do the circuit at the time, you know, which I'd been going to watch, you know, like we used to go to the same place in Islington on a Sunday for about like 6 months. And in the end, and then like during I was doing like the community radio from the radio course, and like the guy that emceed the gig in Islington, he come in and being a guest on my radio show at the time, the community radio show. And, you know, so I like started building a bit of networks, building a bit of, you know, I think I can do this. When I found the course, that really helped. But I just didn't carry on with it. And I had an evening job. It was tough, you know. And ultimately, I didn't want it enough, unfortunately, at that time. You know, who knows where I'd be now at the moment. But 20 years on. But eventually, I just got back into it. I just, you know, it was still there. You know, I was working the door of a gig and like helping my friend book the open spots. He would book the professional acts. I would book the open spots, recommend him from gigs that I've seen, people that I've seen on the circuit. And it worked quite well, you know. And then in the end, it's like, I've just got to go and perform, you know, do me 5 minutes, talk about where I live, talk about blah, 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 family, girlfriend, whatever. You know, and there we go.
Just keep your mic close for me, because sometimes you pop in and pop out. But,
okay.
So let's talk about the last 5 years. Now you're back in. Let's not talk about this last year, because that's probably a different situation altogether. But you're back in now. You're emceeing, so you're doing. What was that like? Those first couple of years like, and gigs, and where have you been playing, and you know, I suppose you're beginning to realise what that dream was when you went back and did the course all those years ago, and now you're being able to actually get out there and do what you wanted all these years.
Yeah, so like the first month of coming back, say from the 30th of September through to the end of October, you know, I literally, like, in the diary every night there was, where possible, there was a gig. So that first month I'd done like 15, 17 gigs in that first month, the first 30 days. So like literally one every other day, you know, just really pushing it. So all those years I'd been putting it off, like, and I'd made a few small comebacks in that time, but like nothing worth sort of, you know, booking things in, doing a few minutes or 5 minutes, and then not really going anywhere with it, you know. And because I wasn't like a natural on stage at that time, it was like, well, me doing like one gig a month is like, you know, it's not going to be, the jokes are not going to stick in there. It's going to be clunky on stage. I'm going to have to take my notebook on and read it. You know, it just won't be the same. You know, it won't be what you expect to see when you see a stand-up comedian. So when I first done this, you know, the 5 years ago today, the 30th of September, was let's just gig as much as I can. Like, I know, like, now it's all on the internet. Yeah, I know all these little gigs. I know where they're run. I know how to get to them. I know some of the people that will be on the gigs from working in the door of the other club. And I went out and done, like, you know, literally every day. So eventually it's stuck in there, you know, and the jokes will just come naturally, more naturally. I'll look more natural on stage, you know, work very hard to make it look natural. That's the kind of one of the little secrets of comedy, you know.
Doing gigs that regularly, does that make a big difference? Because I suppose you're getting used to the routine. You know, if I say this, the crowd are going to react like that. Then I've got a second joke there. Does it? Because I always just, you know, practice makes perfect, as they say. But the more times you go, well, any walk of life, but I imagine even more so. I remember Ricky Gervais once said, he'll do a bunch of warm up stuff. And then, but once when he gets to the point of he's doing his live shows, he's practiced it so many times, he said once he gets it right, then it works every night, always.
Yeah.
Because he's got his set, he's got his routine, he knows where the jokes are, and then he can just reel it off. He said, but it takes him like a year to get to that 1 hour or whatever that Netflix special is going to be. But it takes him some time. But do you find that, like, and also another example, Ed Sheeran said that he was going out. I mean, I know it's different, but he said he was gigging every night in London for about 3 years, non-paid, every night. And he said he was like, oh, am I ever going to get anywhere? And he had to do those 3 years. Like I call it the hard yards of whether it's comedian, whether you're a comedian or if you're a songwriter or whatever. And it sounds like you've done a lot of those hard yards where, you're doing 15 gigs a month.
Yeah.
Makes it easier over time because you're out there, you're practicing your craft more.
Exactly. Yeah. You're on. Everyone just craves stage time. Like when you're at the beginning as a newbie, as an open mic comedian, you go to the gig. You might have to take a friend. You stay for the whole night. You see all the acts, and then you go home. At the end of the night, maybe there's like a little trophy at the end of the night. Sometimes some people. When you get a little bit more established and you know more people, you can start off. You can get there early. You can go to the early for the Covent Garden gig, I'll say, for example. You can be the opening spot at Covent Garden. You might get 5 minutes, might get 10 minutes, and then you can, because the promoter, the MC, your mates, because you'll do him a favour at some point. Then you can rush off and you can do a second gig on the other side of London or the other side of the West End. And some people were doing like 2 or 3 gigs a night when I was starting out as an MC, and I'd have like mates dropping in and dropping out, And ultimately, you want everybody to stay and enjoy the night, but when you get that little bit more established, you do people favours, they do you favours. And if you can get like 30 minutes stage time a night instead of 10 minutes or 5 minutes, after you have to be a little bit more established. You just, you can try stuff out at each gig and see if it works at one gig, see if it doesn't work at another gig. It's like, why did it work at the first gig and not the second gig? It's all these little things are going on. It's like a sort of like a master plan, and you're practicing for the big gig, like the Ricky Gervais. You're practicing for that one day when you're going to do that big gig, the hour tour or the theatre or a competition. At our level, it's more like we're getting ready for that competition. We want to just go on stage in that competition and be so good that the judge has got to put us through to the next round, or put us into the final or the semi-final, or get us into the Edinburgh section of the competition. That sort of thing, basically. You
said something interesting there when you're saying, like, you could say a joke one night and it'd be work, and then say a similar joke another night when it not quite work. Like, how do you? Because mentally, that's a hard thing to go. Well, what did I do differently? How did that come across different? How do you sort of? Because you don't always get them recorded, I guess. So how do you deconstruct a night and go, I would do that again. I'll do those 5 things again. I would do not that one again. Like, it must be quite hard for you to sit down, decompress, write it out and go, right, what am I going to use in the next night? How do you go through that?
It is really difficult, and you do have to record as much as you can, whether it's audio or video. And because I was gigging so much, I was like, I wasn't recording everything. And then I was recording a lot of audio rather than video, because it just, ends up you won't be able to have any memory left on your phone, and they charge it over. I bought like a camcorder and then it went wrong. It was like, oh, why is it always me? So, and I was eventually, like, obviously after I've done like the circuit for a year, the open mic circuit, I've become an MC, and I'm just gigging so much, and I'm doing the admin for booking all the acts as the MC for an open mic gig. I'm just not bothering to record stuff, which I should do, and I can remember a little bit, that worked, that didn't work, and stuff like that. I just built up so much material because I'm writing a lot of topical stuff as well, but I just wasn't recording enough. But like, for example, I was dating a girl, and she would, like, we'd finish the gig, we'd go home, and we'd be sitting on the tube, and she's already watching it on her phone, listening to it, probably because she didn't want to talk to me on the tube. We're not together anymore, but she was already studying it, and then since then she's gone on and won awards and that sort of thing, so she's doing well, and she had the right, like, the work ethic and that, and she worked at it, and I'm just starting to do that as well now. I because I MC a lot, I just change stuff about, and and I do a lot of crowd work, and that sometimes from doing the crowd work you'll get extra jokes which you can use again. But I mean, coming back to what you said, it's like, there's like this rule of, like, if you try a bit of material 3 times and it doesn't work, you just bin it, But if it's a bit that you really like, you know, and it's like you think, well, why didn't it work at that first gig? And was it like, you know, sometimes it might be the act before you, or something the MC said, something that's happened at the gig before you've arrived, something that's happened at the gig that's, you know, it's like, oh, I'm not going to do that bit about the tree or about the pig or whatever. You know what I mean? So very random stuff. But yeah, so it's that's the, if we knew that, if I knew the answer to that one, I could bottle it and, you know, become very rich. If why things work some nights and not the others. But definitely, if people are thinking about starting from watching this or listening to this, then yeah, record stuff, watch stuff, listen stuff back. You know.
How do you write your jokes? I mean, imagine it must be such a difficult thing because you're probably out there seeing things, and I guess a joke can come from anywhere. You could be looking at your phone, you could be looking at your wife, seeing the cat. Like, I guess a joke can come from anywhere. But how is your brain constantly processing stuff and thinking, is that funny? I don't know.
It is constantly processing stuff and thinking about it, and like, what's funny about that? You know, and again, it's the self-deprecating stuff. It might be something really bad, like during lockdown, my kitchen's just basically, my sink has just fallen apart. Pardon me, and like the cats were not responding to me, and I'm going mad. But and it's fun, and like I did, my friend, it was like literally the first week of the first week after lockdown had eased, and people were starting to run gigs again, and I popped in to see my friend running a gig, and there were two of them, and one of them said to me like, "Oh, you're going to perform tonight?" I said, "No, I'm not really in the right frame of mind. I've had all this thing going on with my kitchen and all that." And he said, "Well, come on stage and talk about it." And I wasn't ready at that particular time, but about a week later, it's like, yeah, I can make that funny now. Definitely, that stuff about me kitchen sort of falling apart and
yeah. I think because that's the you're right. The self-deprecating stuff is funny. I remember, and I don't know how true this is, but I remember reading years ago that Jack D was trying to be a really fun, happy type of comedian at the very beginning of his career. And he did it for about 3 years. And he was saying he was just not really getting anywhere. And then one day he went on and said, "This is my last gig. I can't be with this anymore. I don't want to do it." And suddenly he got a reaction because he was just really deadpan. And he was like, "Oh, people like me deadpan," and he carried on like that. But he said he was almost right at the end of doing. I think I read that years ago.
I heard the exact same story at my comedy course, my first comedy course in 2000, and the Keith who was running the course said Jack D wasn't getting anywhere. I think he had a job as a waiter, so you know it's a very stressful job, and going out and doing the comedy and that sort of thing. Again, there's no internet, no TV in them days. So he's exactly that. He said, like, I'm going to give up. I'm going to quit comedy, but I'm going to honour the gigs that I've booked. Like, I've got 7 more gigs booked, whatever. I'm going to do those gigs. And he just adopted that style, exactly like you said, deadpan, and he got a reaction from it. So he obviously saw that worked for him and just carried on. And look at him now. You know, I remember his first TV series back in the 90s, and you think, oh, he's good, and he's really amazing. He's just the deadpan guy. But yeah, it literally happened like that. So this is one thing that you don't know. When you start, you think, oh, I'm going to go on stage and be like this. I'm going to be crazy. I'm going to be wacky. I'm going to be intelligent. I'm going to be self-deprecating. I'm going to be arrogant. I don't know. And then when you're on stage, again, you're talking to the audience, or you're seeing how the audience react to your jokes. You're learning on stage. You're learning as you go. This is stuff that you won't learn off stage at a comedy course, from a book, you know, from a YouTube video. You're not going to learn that unless you're on stage. So you know how your persona is going to work. So for Jack D, he had this original idea to be the bubbly guy, and he found that it didn't work for him, or what worked better for him is the deadpan. And look at him now. You know, there's just you only learn that on stage, and this is why people will drive like an hour or 3 hours out of London to do a 10-minute spot. A gig in Shrewsbury or Shropshire or wherever it is. People will go across London. They'll try and do 2 or 3 gigs a night in London, or they'll drive up to Liverpool for a spot. They'll drive to Manchester just to do 5 or 10 minutes to impress a promoter, maybe. But also, you know, like, oh yeah, I just want to see what works for me, you know. And London audiences could be different to Northern audiences, Manchester audiences, you know, or audiences out in the country where they're not like city sort of people. So performing in front of any sort of audience is just a bonus, you know. I mean, I'm not, but like, there's a few people that are street performers, and then they go and do the comedy. You know, they're just used to being in front of people, but different styles, you know, basically.
It must. I mean, you've got to really love it. and have a real obsession around it to make it work, because it's a hard old industry to get into, because you have people there, they might be drinking or or whatever, and they're going to probably make it difficult for you. So you've got to really love it and want to really love to hone your craft to get somewhere. So there's always a lot of respect I have for comedians, because there's a real long journey you've got to get through, really to get successful in it in some respects.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree 100%. It is tough, and you do have to love it. You wouldn't drive to Manchester or get the mega bus to overnight to Cardiff or to Nottingham just to do 5 minutes, just to impress a promoter and just to get the stage time. It's
pretty much all top comedians have had to go through. It's almost like a rite of passage. You've got to go through this, right? You've got to do your open mics. You've got to do the free gigs. And you do it, and just like the Ed Sheeran story a second ago, you've got to do it almost off your own back long enough, and then eventually you get good enough where someone you get to the right promoter, and you go from 5 minutes to 7 minutes to 10 minutes, and now someone wants to give you 15. It feels like that's almost the rite of passage. You've got to go through that as a comedian.
It is very much. What you said about Ed Sheeran is so true. And Ed Sheeran, this is a story that I've heard from the circuit. There's a gig in North London near the Arsenal football ground. Blackstock Road is called, that Ed used to live upstairs from the gig. It was a comedy gig, but there was so there'd be a comedy gig once a week, but there'd also probably be like a music night once a week, and that, not that I ever went to any of those, but Ed lived upstairs in that flat, and then, like you say, he would go out and gig every night of the week, and if whether it was Time Out or whether using a Facebook group on the internet or a social group, you find where the gigs are and you go and perform. You turn up, you put your name down. The music gigs are slightly different, where you can just turn up, put your name down, and you'll be on. Whereas with comedy, it's kind of a little bit more email in advance, DM us in advance, drop a thing. But there are gigs where you can just turn up, and that's great, because sometimes you take a friend and lets you down at the last minute, and that or you have your own situation where you have to pull out at the last minute, and the promoter thinks, oh, he's not reliable, and that sort of thing. So I always like sort of there's gigs where you can just turn up, which is great. You've got a bit of everything, a bit of everything. But, yeah, there was an article again in the Standard. It wasn't Ed Sheeran. I can't think who it was now, but she's won like BAFTAs and not BAFTAs. No, she's won like Mojos or Brit Awards, and she's saying like, I used to perform in front of 5 people in Finsbury Park, blah blah blah, and it's like, oh man, I totally get what she's coming from. That's the journey, like you say, whether it's musicians or comedians or even poets, or we've done it. You put the hard. You wouldn't do it if you didn't love it. You put the hard work in, the graft in, the unpaid gigs. And that,
it's almost like it's got to be a hobby to start with, and I say a hobby, a passion, a hobby that you just keep doing and keep repeating for long enough. You listen and you try and learn as much as you can. You build your network, and you have to do the hard yards. I don't think there's no substitute for hard work, and for you to have to put yourself in front of it every single night for a long period of time. What's it like when it goes really well? When you're out there and you're like, every joke is just hit the mark. What's that feel like?
You're just buzzing, and you just like, I was telling people last week, like you should have come to the gig. It's like I was floating home. I just floated home because it was such a really good gig. I think it was like that they were a very warm crowd. They were friends of the promoter. He's a very new promoter. He was putting the gig on, but it was just such a good feeling. And obviously after lockdown, everyone's glad to be out of the house. Everyone's glad to be having a drink, even if they're wearing a mask, or they're seeing their friends again. And it was just such a great feeling. It's like I just wanted to. You do like 7 or 8 minutes, and you think, I won't upset the promoter. I won't overrun. I really felt like doing like 15 and just carrying on. And I thought, I'm going to get off 8 minutes and respect the promoter and respect the audience, just in case I've had the first 8 minutes have been so good, just in case the rest of it doesn't go so well. I'm going to cut off, get off if you're doing well, get off if you're not doing well, is like another thing that they say. But yeah, basically, it's a great feeling, and then you're like, what do we do now? It's have a drink and chat with friends, as we did last week. Have a drink, chat with friends. Let the audience come up to you and say how much they enjoyed it. That really helps. Oh, you want to let me buy you a drink? That really helps. yeah, it's an amazing feeling, you know, because you know you've nailed it, sort of thing. I wish I'd recorded it. In my case, most people record it, but it's for my case, it's you know, I want to see that again, you know. So yeah, it's a great feeling. It's like you've nailed it, you know, basically. There's no better feeling almost.
So you've been able to start gigging again since the COVID lockdown. How did you approach? How did you? I mean, it's obviously COVID's not a funny situation at all, but what it did do for a lot of people, it gave us a lot of time to do stuff. Were you able to use that time to write stuff? Was that helpful, or how did you approach that?
I was writing stuff. Obviously, I'm a topical comedian, so I do write stuff. I tweet stuff. I wasn't very productive during lockdown. I was definitely like using it to like I was watching a lot of DVDs and YouTube and Amazon Prime and that. But I did a few YouTube videos, topical videos, and I really should have possibly started those a bit earlier, made them a bit more regular, be a bit more productive. But contributed to a few friends' shows. I've done a few shows on Zoom, but yeah, I wrote stuff, you know, as I should do as a topical comedian. But I wasn't productive at the beginning, you know. I was kind of, and I live on my own. It's like, you know, I'm going mad, sort of thing. So it's like, I thought to myself, what should I do? I've lost a lot of work. Should I go out and work in a supermarket, like meet people every day, earn some money, be a key worker? Should I be like a volunteer? Should I deliver some food and medicines to people who can't do it? Or should I be a proper comedian? Should I stay at home and have a breakdown? So basically what I did. That's basically, just for one joke, I did that. I'm just going to collapse a bit and then I'm going to gradually recover, you know. So that's what I did. That's what I did, you know. Trying to be the next Jack D, basically.
Yeah. And now you've been out. You said you've been doing some gigs again. What's it been like getting out there again?
The first one was tough. It was in a street rather than in a venue. You know, it wasn't in a beer garden because some of my friends were doing gigs, driving gigs. You know, like, so the audience would be in the car and the comedian would be on stage, and there'd be like a microphone and like a technical like a wire into the car. So the volume, the comedian would be pumped into the car. So I didn't do any of those gigs, but I went to one with my friend, watched him do it. So there were beer garden gigs where it was obviously socially distanced, and then like it was just an open mic gig. It was a friend of mine was running one in the street opposite the pub where he normally did it, you know. So we just all stood around, and I took my notebook on, and he says like I was about the 5th or 6th act on that particular time. He said, don't you know? I said, I'm getting 5 months, you know. So that one didn't go that well, but then like I've done 5 since we come back, since lockdown, and the 4 after that have been great. Have just been lovely. Been, you know, they're gigging with friends and that, you know, there's no pressure as such. I mean, there's pressure. There's you know, I don't want to go on stage. I worry about, you know, having a good gig, but you know that they're a supportive crowd, which helps, you know, which helps.
Because as you say, topical comedian.
Yes.
Does that mean you have to constantly change your sets because you need to be more on point and more topical each week or each month or something? Is it maybe hard to use some gags you were using 12 months, 24 months ago? I mean, if you're talking about Boris Johnson, there's probably loads of jokes you can be using all the time, or Donald Trump. So you know they've got 4 years or so to make good of those jokes. But how is it like? Do you have to keep on refreshing your sets?
You do, yeah, and like can be the problem in the comedy clubs is that the topical stuff, it won't always work. You know, not everybody's reading the papers and watching the news and to it. You know, with the Brexit and Corona and Trump and that. You know, over the last 4 years, it's just been crazy, like a news cycle, really, hasn't it? But in the clubs, you kind of like, right, okay, I'm not going to do the politics stuff because that will split people. You know, maybe some people are not interested in sport and all that sort of thing. So literally, you're just going to have a set about yourself, where you're from, where you know, who you look like, your relationships, your family, you know, you grew up, all that sort of thing. So that would be your club set. And then what I'm doing is just being topical, and it's difficult to do it in the clubs where it works for me. I don't know about everybody else, but I can do it in bits and pieces rather than do a whole 5 minutes on Brexit or Trump and that. You know, where if I talk to an audience member who's American. It's like, oh, blah, 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 Donald Trump, visited here. Do you think you should have met the Queen? Blah, blah, blah. But they've got nothing in common, apart from the tax avoidance, maybe. But things like that, it's like, oh, and all that sort of thing, So I mean, in a perfect world, I would, I could be booked by a club to go and do a set about politics or about sport or about just the week's events. So what I'm looking for really on that side is more themed gigs rather than the normal open mic gigs or comedy night gigs where, you don't want to, like you were asking earlier about, you don't want to alienate the audience, and, just a joke won't work. And you kind of almost know that a joke won't work. And if you, and then it's like, okay, I've lost them early on. It's like, I've got to work really hard and bring them back, or this is going to be like, I'm just going to die for like 10 minutes sort of thing, So.
How do you sort of make that decision that you need to pivot your set? Is it just like, okay, on those two gags have not landed, and now I need to change, and actually they're going to be more interested in something more mainstream, or you think, actually, no, I need to talk about sport. Like, how do you pivot and then work out where you go next?
It's trial and error and experience, really. There was a guy that was on Britain's Got Talent about 2 years ago, Daliso Chapo,
Okay.
African guy, and he was I've met him once or twice, gig with him, but he did an interview during the Edinburgh Festival last year on a Scottish radio station, and I don't know if I'm going to remember it, but he had a free joke structure to work out. One would be a political joke, and if that didn't work, he knows they're not a political crowd. One would be a sexual joke, a rude joke. And if that works, it doesn't work, what kind of crowd they are. And then there was a third one. I can't quite remember what it was. It was such a really good interview. And he did that quite early on. It's like, if you can work out an audience from 3 jokes, that's fantastic. And then what's going to bang, bang, bang. And I've got a friend who I haven't seen for ages, old Dave, but Dave Black, he's brilliant. He's fantastic. But he would say, like, I've got set A, I've got set B, set C, and set D, 4 or 5 minute sets. And they don't quite work if you put them all together. But if he would sort of like, he could see early on what worked. And again, if you're at the gig and you see what other comedians are doing and seeing what works and what doesn't work, you can kind of make a little judgment about what will work and what won't work. But again, you won't know till you're on stage. But generally, you can mix and match it.
And are each audience quite unique, or actually, would you say you go to a gig in Bethnal Green is the same every time, or how do you read that crowd?
Yeah, I think it's just, again, like the reaction from when previous acts are on or when you're on stage. I'm sure like the more professional acts than me or the more experienced acts than me would be able to judge that, and that it's something that, again, comes with trial and error.
That's the experience playing into it in some respects.
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
And what's your future? Where's the future going for you? What's next?
I think the themed comedy, topical comedy, me doing my own hour topical comedy show, YouTube videos, podcasts where I chat with some other comedians about topical stuff, and building it from there. It's so tough to build it on the circuit. I submit stuff to the BBC for like a new material topical show, which is only 12 episodes a year, 6 at the beginning of the year, 6 at the end of the year, which is ongoing, which is going at the moment, actually, towards the end of the year. But that's where I see myself, is doing like an hour of themed topical material, whether it's politics, sport, celebrity, and all the and random stuff, and that sit around, maybe take a newspaper on stage and go through it, and that sort of thing. I would have been going to Edinburgh Festival this year, obviously with COVID that was cancelled, but I was planning to go there and doing a topical hour this year for the first time. Previous years I've done like split hours with other people, so I just you get used to it, and you're learning while you're doing it, and then gradually what you do. So the structure of Edinburgh is like, normally you'll go there and you'll see people do an hour, like you're talking about Ricky Gervais and Jack D earlier. They've all been to the Edinburgh Festival and done their hours, but the first year you go to Edinburgh, you might go as an audience member or as a punter or as an open spot, and you'll be getting spots on the compilation shows, and again, it's all down to networking, who you know and all that, or being in the right place. Someone will come running out of the venue, such and such Dave hasn't turned up, we need someone to do 5-10 minutes, and he'll see you at the bar and he'll drag you in and you'll get a spot. It can be trial and error, just being in the right place at the right time. But then if you go with a plan in Edinburgh, you might go the first year, you might go 3 of you doing 20 minutes each. You know, you've had a few years on the circuit. You know, you're used to doing 5s and 10s. You've done a few 15 and 20s here and there. You MC your own gig, so you've done a few longer gigs. Second year, you'll do half an hour. 2 guys will do like half an hour each, and then that third year, you'll do the hour yourself. You know, that's the general plan. It might go slightly different. You might do 4 of you do 15, 6 of you do 10, and that sort of thing. You might go from there, or you might do 10 or 15, and your friend will do 45 because your friend's that little bit more experienced. You know, you share all the costs of the venue and the marketing and the advertising and the flyering. You know, because that's all part of the learning as well. You know, you go to Edinburgh, you fly your own show, or you learn. Some people love flying, some people hate it. You know, and they'll pay. But, you know, when you're spending so much money anyway in Edinburgh for the venue, for your accommodation, to where you live, your venue where you're hiring, your marketing, your cost of the brochure to advertise in the main Edinburgh brochure. For me, I just prefer to fly for myself. But other people, they hate it. They hate flying. So there you go.
That's an interesting part, actually, which I hadn't really considered before now, which is the business element of it, which is you're not only starring in your own show and writing it and performing it, you've got to do the business aspect. You've got to get the punters through the door. You've got to get people in there to listen to you. You've got to do that. And then there's the costs and the bit. That's interesting. I didn't realise. Again, rite of passage. You've got to do Edinburgh. That's part of it. You know, absolutely. It's a huge part of it. But that means you've also got to promote your own show. You've got to get people bums on seats, as it were, to get enough people to then start following you.
Absolutely. You know, and social media helps with the getting people to follow you and tweeting out stuff. But you really do have to do it. And I came from a sales and a marketing background, so it was easier for me, I feel. But you get some people that are just no experience in that. You know. If very early on in their comedy career they've won an award, they've won a competition, and they've got signed up by an agent, fantastic for them. And they won't have to do as much of that themselves. You know, they'll have people advising them how to do it. But if you're like, you know, you've come in and I'd never do that well at competitions. You know, I just, you know, maybe the right 5 minute set. I just, you know, where I've got so much material, I'm writing stuff every day, and you know, I can never quite fit the perfect 5 and never quite done well enough in competitions. But which was always like my plan is like, you know, when I was on the sidelines working on the door, it's like, right, I'll get started in comedy, do the competition, get promoted. And it hasn't worked for me that way. So I've gone in a different direction with the theme, the topical, and the emceeing, which I love, absolutely love that. But if you win something early on, or you do well in a competition early on, you get to a final, you know, you get yourself an agent, and they'll help you with that rite of passage in Edinburgh. But it's, you know, it's an experience that you have to do in terms of Edinburgh, you know. And my friend calls it like a boot camp, you know, because you're on stage for whether it's a 30 or an hour every day. Stuff that doesn't work at the beginning of the month will, you know, by the end of the month you'll have found how it, you know, whether it's the right word, you take a word out, you put a word in, whether you pause at a certain stage, or you go straight on, or you go a bit crazy, you shout it instead of like just delivering it in a normal monotone Jack D style. It's good to keep referencing Jack D. It's amazing. Edinburgh's amazing. Yeah.
At Edinburgh, so I know it's a long road. Do you say a month?
It's festival? A month. Yeah, give or take. Yeah, it's about 3.5 weeks. Yeah.
And you perform most days for that month. Is that how it works? The
general idea is you'll apply to the venue or the promoter of the venue. There might be a free fringe, like a breakaway sort of thing, and they'll give you that room, City Cafe, midnight, for 25, 26 days. You know, you might have Sundays off, you might have Wednesdays off. You know, you work it out, is what day's the quiet day, what day's the, you know, like, because mentally you'll just go crazy. You'll go crazy. It's great to get the stage time, but Edinburgh is so full on that you'll probably need like one. Some people have 1 day a week off. Some people have a day off in the middle, like the 13th or the 14th of August. And some people will just go straight through, you know, because again, stage time is just so valuable. And you'll be paying for the room, so you may as well like be in there that night, you know. So what I did in the first year I went up properly, 2016, I was working for a guy who's kind of like a mentor to me. I was working the door for him, and he would be on every night, and he didn't put me on enough. I was really annoyed about that. But then, because he was quite old, he had the Sundays off. So what we eventually did is me and my flatmates, who were all obviously performing in their own bits and pieces, we took that hour on the Sunday and we put our own show on. And so that got me, 4 extra spots during the month that I wouldn't have got, because he wasn't putting me on, even though I was the doorman, but, which was annoying. Let it go. But working for him was amazing. It was so good experience. It was good networking. And that was 2016. I worked for him for the whole month. And then when I came back to London in September of 2016, I started running my own gig, emceeing my own Tuesday nights at a venue that had comedy 7 nights a week. They had like a Groupon deal where the customer would get like for 10 or 15 quid or whatever it was, which I didn't know. I wasn't involved on the marketing side of it, but I just did the comedy. The punter would get a pizza, a drink, and a comedy night. And the comedy could vary, because it was open mic quality Monday, Tuesday, and then Wednesday they would have a bit more of a structure, But I dealt with the Tuesdays. Another friend done the Mondays, and then as I became a little bit more established as being an MC on the Tuesdays at that venue, the big guy, who booked the weekends, who booked the whole of it, who booked me the Tuesdays, he started saying, "Can you come in on Thursday and just do like a 10-minute spot, or you come in and can you MC Thursday nights because I'm going to be off. I've got a date or whatever, or a family wedding, blah blah blah." And then gradually, from being the Tuesday guy, the MC guy, I became like I was doing Saturdays, Friday and Saturday nights when it was a full crowd. Full room, the Tuesday night, the open mics wouldn't necessarily be full rooms. We had a few full rooms on the Tuesdays, and it was just glorious. It was just having everything works, and and you got good acts, and you got a few newer acts that don't quite work, and it's just the whole experience is quite good, And these people who bought a Groupon deal for £15, they think they've had a good night out. They haven't seen someone on the telly, which you're probably not going to do for 15 in central London. But like Ricky Gervais or Jack D. But it was a great experience for me. So from being the Tuesday guy, I sort of graduated up to being the Saturday guy in that small venue in Covent Garden, and then we moved across to a similar venue in southwest London, and again I initially stayed on as the Tuesday guy because I'd already had people booked when we left Covent Garden pretty abruptly. I won't go into that. And then I carried on as a Tuesday guy, and then again gradually became the Friday, Saturday night MC guy, which for me was like, yes, progress, and just take it from there, basically.
Well, why do you think Edinburgh Festival was so special? It's I know many people absolutely love it, and it's a great platform for comedians, but also an incredible event for people to go to. What do you reckon makes it so special?
For the audience, you can come out at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock in the morning. You can watch a children's theatre show if you want. If you've got the kids with you, you can watch a bit of improv at midday in the Stand, which is a great Scottish venue, like 52 weeks of the year, not just Edinburgh. You can go and see like this up and coming guy doing the 2 o'clock show. You might have seen him, and you might have seen someone. You can go and see a guy you've seen do 10 minutes in London. You thought, oh, he was really good, or she was really good. She's doing a show in Edinburgh, 3 o'clock in the free venue. You put money in the bucket on the way out. You judge it how you pay what you can afford in that respect. You can see 5 or 6, 7, 8 shows a day if you're that intensely a comedy fan. And there are people that do that. They'll book their week in Edinburgh, or their weekend in Edinburgh, or their midweek in Edinburgh, 3 or 4 shows. They'll get the catalogue when it comes out in June, early July, and they'll start going through the brochure. And they'll circle what they want to see, and then they'll work out their schedule for the day: 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock. And if they're hardcore and they're on the Red Bull or something like that, they can go through till midnight, and just watch 12 hours of comedy a day. Because again, we being new in 2018, after 2016, I've been working for the guy. 2018, I went and we had a midnight slot, and it's like, oh, how are we going to get an audience at midnight? But we had such a good venue, a location. We were where all the footfall was. We had people coming from the main drag. We had people coming from the high street, and it was such a really good bar, City Cafe it's called. And we some nights we'd get 5, 10 in. And on the weekends it'd be packed. We had a small room, but we get 20, 25 in. People crammed in. You can't do it at the moment with the social distancing, obviously. But it would just be glorious, And that's how you improve as a comic, by doing that. for 25 days in a row, you know, as a sort of as a try. For the audience, it's great. You can go and see 10 hours of comedy a day. As a comedian, once you've got your own slot at midnight, you might fly for somebody else, or you can go and do open spots at compilation shows. So there'll be like an hour of Irish comedians or an hour of Jewish comedians, an hour of one-liners, you know, and you'll go and do 5 or 10 or 15 minutes spots on their shows, because you get to know them and you reciprocate for them. They come do a spot on your show, your compilation show. So again, because I've run gigs in London, you know, you run a compilation show in Edinburgh, you know, you'll know all the people who want gigs, who are good, who can perform under pressure of a late night drunk audience. You know, again, it can go the other way, you know, in Edinburgh. But it's gigs like that you can learn from. You know, if it does go wrong, you just learn from it, you know. And the next time it happens on a bigger stage, shall we say, when it matters, you think you've got something in that brain that's like, I know how to deal with this, you know. Almost.
Well, you mentioned there, like, you know, with having that an audience where people have been drinking. How do you deal with that when there's a lot of hecklers, or, you know, sometimes, of course, as an MC, you want to encourage that because it can be part of your act. If you can be quickly enough to be equally, sometimes it might well get in the way. I mean, how do you deal with that, the crowd interaction part, especially if they've been drinking?
Well, I mean, I love, like, as an MC, I love the interaction with the crowds and where you're from and what do you do. So you'll have, like, maybe you'll have jokes set up about where they're from, and it's like, oh, South London, or what's your wallets, guys, or, you know, like, oh, cab driver, blah blah blah, something like that, or whatever. Somebody said to me I've done an MC course as well, comedy, different from the comedy course. I've done an MC course, and he said that there's 12 professions, you know. So if you have a joke for like any particular profession, you know, you've got something to go on straight away, you know. So you're asking them, and the mentor guy that I worked with in 2016 said, when you ask the audience a question, ideally you want to know what the answer is, so you know where you're going to go with it. But obviously, if you're asking them where they're from or what they do, that could go anywhere. But, you know, the more experience. If you're doing it every day for a month in Edinburgh, or you're running a gig every week in London, or 2 gigs a week in London, it's just more opportunity to experience different things, different reactions from audiences, and you just try and learn it and remember it, and so hopefully it's there for the next time you need it, almost, you know.
Peter, it's been so interesting and enlightening speaking to you tonight. So thank you so much for your time. It's been Absolutely. A real pleasure.
Thank you.
I think for my final question for you tonight really is just about, for people listening and watching as well, what's the best, if you've got that as a burning desire, you want to become a comedian, but you haven't started yet, what's the best way to get started? I know you mentioned the course, so that might be a route, but if you're sat on the sofa today going, I really want to do this, from your experience, what's the best route to try and begin?
The course is, I think, eventually is the best way to do it. You can buy a book. You can. There's a few books. Logan Murray is a great. He runs a course. He also has written a great book. Chris Head wrote a book about directing comedy, slightly different, but again, the knowledge is invaluable. Go and watch live comedy. Obviously, watching on YouTube and Netflix and Amazon helps, you know, and BBC, you know, your favourite comics live at the Apollo. It helps, obviously, watching comedy, but go to the live gigs, because, you know, things happen at live gigs, like we've been saying, like the late night crowds. Things happen at live gigs that don't get edited out when it goes onto television. You don't see it, you know. And you won't. No night is. I think you was asking earlier about the audiences, how you can judge an audience. Is no 2 nights are the same. You know, it's you just have different reactions every night. You'll have the bloke in the front row who's got drunk early and fallen asleep in the front row, and will take the mick out of him. You know, so go to live comedy and then look at maybe doing a course or what works for you. Buy a book and work through it. But again, like we said earlier, that, you know, it's all very well talking about the theory of doing comedy, but you only learn on the stage. You know, you can learn the basics off stage. You can get ready for that first 5 minutes, but, you know, once you're on stage, it's like it's you against the world, like you say. You know, having the microphone helps. You know, is that authority, that power. You know, for me, the high, what the phrase is now, it's higher. It's not higher class. It's an improv thing. I can't remember now, or an acting thing. But yeah.
So
higher status. That was it. Higher status.
So interesting talking to you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, mate. Yeah, it's been lovely.
Yeah, it's been great. So thank you so much. And I think people listening and on the podcast will really get a lot from it. Just to hear about your journey from you doing the course many years ago, taking a break, but then building up again 5 years ago to where you are to now. I mean, many people's dream is to be able to play. I know you call it playing. It's the gig. Is to play. Is at would be at Edinburgh Festival, and also in some of the gigs that you're doing in London. So I think you are living many people's dream and often your own. So it's great. It's great to see you progress. And I really hope it all goes well for you.
And obviously, if they are thinking of performing and they, go and see a gig, go to the Edinburgh Festival, book a week or a weekend or a midweek, 3 or 4 days, and then while you're there, just go and watch as much comedy as you can, and then when you get back from Edinburgh, start working on how you're going to perform, if that's what you want to do, and it's great, there's opportunities. If you live in London, you can gig every night of the week, if you live in a village in Aberdeen, it's not so easy, but, you can travel, There are people, the gig we did last week, after lockdown, people were driving from Coventry for 5 minutes, they're driving 3 hours, 2 hours from Coventry to do a 5-minute spot, and Leicester as well. There's one guy from Leicester. I think they're on lockdown, but he was there, so I won't say any more about that. But it's just if you want to do it, you've got the car as well, you've got the wheels, or you want to go on the night bus or the mega bus, just go and do it, basically. Yeah, but I recommend the course as well. If have a look. There's so many courses around at the moment. I mean, people follow me on Twitter, Topical Comedian, and message me and like DM, and I can give advice if people are really looking to do that. And I run gigs, or I was running gigs. I've not got back into running gigs at the moment from lockdown, but maybe another month or two I'll be back as well running gigs. So there's always space on my stage for people who want to try it out.
It's good.
They're going to buy me a drink as well. That helps.
So it's definitely going to help build that rapport with you.
Absolutely.
It's so good. By the way, it just reminded me of something. I when I was in my early 20s, I moved to Putney.
Oh yeah.
And I moved to Putney, and I was trying to get into comedy then. I didn't get very far. The funny thing is, I moved from Devon to get into London. So I was living in Putney, and I was going off, and I was starting to do some open mic nights, getting 5 minutes here and whatever. But I moved to London. I moved to Putney to do it, and my first gig was in Exeter.
Oh wow! Oh my God! You went back.
I was like,
done it the wrong way.
How did this happen? And that was my opening line: was how did I end up back here? I just moved to London to do gigs, and my first gig was down here doing an open mic night, and I was like, this is completely counterintuitive.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's comedy journey can take you all over the place. I did my MC course in Putney, actually. There you go. Small world. Small link.
Good man. Thanks so much for your time tonight.
Thank you so much. Lovely talking to you. Speak to you again soon. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye then.
Bye.